As we prepare for meditation, let's take a deep breath as you settle comfortably in your chair, releasing the stress of the morning. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so, and take another nice deep breath as we join our hearts in this quiet time together. Today, let's celebrate being filled with the divine light of God. Yes, there's chaos that surrounds us and feels like it could swallow us and keep us in darkness and fear. But let us remember that our divine light is greater than any situation or circumstance that we face. We live as spiritual truth that life is eternal. We can choose to speak life-affirming words that uplift not only our spirits, but our world. So as we prepare to go into the silence, my affirmation this week is I co-create my life with God. Love and joy are my acts of defiance this week. I dare to embody and share those God qualities with others. What will your affirmation be? Let's spend a few minutes in the silence to find out. when you're ready, gently take another deep breath and return your awareness to the room, bringing your affirmation with you. We'll close with a short prayer. Divine Spirit, I am one with your creative force, and I live the peace and love I wish to see in the world. For this and for so much more, we say, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Amen.
Much. Good morning, all. So good to see you today. I want to tell you a cool thing I heard this past week. Something that gives a pastor pardonable pride when he hears something like this. A lady who lives across the street from where I'm staying right now caught me while I was outside. And she said, somebody in your church did something so wonderful for me, which is really cool for a minister and gives you, swell up with pride, kind of like a dad with his kids. Much better than, somebody in your church really ticked me off, But this was so cool. And she said, last Sunday I fell, and somebody in your church helped me get up and kind of helped me get reoriented. And she said, I don't know their name. And I said, you got any kind of description for me? She said, I know they drove a red Jeep or SUV. Not very helpful. So I was going to say, if that's whoever is here and that's you, holler at me after service. She wants to know your name. I think she wants to send you a card and thank you. So that's just so cool and beautiful to hear something like that. And I do appreciate it. I am proud of y'all all the time. I also want to mention we are having a young adult gathering next Saturday. I'm trying to get a young adult group solidified. We have what I've been able to identify 6 or 8 young adults I'd like to form a group with. And obviously at 65, I wouldn't qualify as a young adult, but I'm very young at heart, very exuberant. But I would like to start this group and ultimately trust Spirit will raise up a real young adult to head it up. But we're going to do mini golf. And so please, if you're around 18 to around 40, we can fudge the numbers a little. Please join us. We're going to play mini golf and in the game in Prescott Valley. The mini golf, the church is providing that. We're just going to each buy our own food. So if you can come, invite friends. If you know somebody in that age range, you've been trying to get them here, maybe they'd like to get some mini golf, to get them in here. So please ask them to join us. We would be delighted. Have them call the church office or my cell number. And thank you for your attention to that and your prayers concerning that. I want to share a story with you about a very special rat. Always like a good rat story to start the day, don't you? A tourist wanders into a back alley antique shop in San Francisco's Chinatown. Picking through the objects on display, he discovers a detailed, life-size bronze sculpture of a rat. The sculpture is so interesting and unique, he picks it up and asks the owner what it would cost. $12 for the rat, sir, says the owner, and $1,000 more for the story behind it. He said, you can keep the story, old man, but I'll take the rat. The transaction complete, the tourist leaves the store with the bronze rat under his arm. As he crosses the street in front of the store, 2 live rats emerge from a sewer drain and fall into step behind him. Nervously looking over his shoulder, he begins to walk faster. But every time he passes another sewer drain, more rats come out to follow him. By the time he's walked 2 blocks, at least 100 rats are at his heels, and people begin to point and shout. He walks even faster, soon breaks into a trot, as multitudes of rats swarm from sewers, basements, vacant lots, and abandoned cars. Rats by the thousands are at his heels, and he sees the waterfront at the bottom of the hill. He panics and starts to run full tilt. No matter how fast he runs, the rats keep up, squealing hideously. Now, not just thousands, but millions. So that by the time he comes rushing up to the water's edge, a trail of rats 12 city blocks long is behind him. Making a mighty leap, he jumps onto a light post, grasping it with one arm while he hurls the bronze rat into San Francisco Bay with the other, as far as he can heave it. Pulling his legs up and clinging to the light post, he watches in amazement as the seething tide of rats surges over the breakwater into the sea, following the bronze rat, where they drown. Shaken and mumbling, he makes his way back to the antique shop. "Ah, so you've come back for the story," says the owner. "No," says the tourist. "I was wondering if you have a bronze statue of a politician." Admittedly, a very short-term solution. But in all seriousness, I want to talk to you this morning about God, government, and good vibes. Not long ago, somebody asked if I had any message concerning the political climate that we find ourselves in the United States. And I said, boy. But I said, I do have something I think I'll share. That prompted me. It's something that I believe it was 2 years ago I probably shared this message at my former pastorate. And it helped me a great deal. And I hope it helps you too, because the climate is, of course, right now very divisive and very toxic. And how do we navigate that as people of faith, as people that are dedicated to love, displaying divine love? How do we navigate this? Because we have political opinions too. Everyone does. So how do we navigate a culture where currently it's not a matter of we need to discuss which is the better idea. It's I got to destroy you because of your idea. That's where we're at so often now. So I want to help you this morning with something that really helped me. This message is very nonpartisan, let me assure you. And it will work with whoever is in office or whatever party is in office. It's good for the long haul. But there's a traditional tension concerning obeying the government or obeying God. At times, the two don't seem to coincide. How do we handle that? Now, ancient civilizations such as Egypt and Rome, they had a solution for it. The emperor is a god. And so you don't have to worry about opposing God, because whatever the emperor or the pharaoh says, that's God's word. And that worked for a while. And then with the advent of Christianity, Christianity came up with a new slant on that called the divine right of kings. And so, well, the king is not a god, but God is in their corner. So you still got to do what they tell you. And so that worked for a while as well, up until the American Revolution and the introduction of representative democracy. Now, it actually had existed before the American Revolution. It existed in ancient Greece for a while. Democracy was practiced. Rome had a republic form of government that worked for a spell. And then the Iroquois nation in North America practiced a form of representative government. So it had existed, but not to the extent that it did with the dawning of the United States of America. And it's spoken of as an experiment, an ongoing experiment of people governing themselves through elected representatives. And so we're continuing the experiment. Sometimes experiments work well, sometimes they don't. But we don't give up on them, right? I believe it's still worth fighting for. But this, speaking of the political turmoil that existed in the time of Jesus, because in Unity we like to say Jesus is our way shower. Isn't that true? It coincides with that statement that became popular in recent years, what would Jesus do? Unity's always asking that, right? Because our way shower directs us as to, how our lives can be lived at their highest and best and most successfully. So during the public ministry of Jesus, we will look at an incident that occurred where he was handed a political hot potato. Now, this began during the public ministry of Jesus, which began during the reign of Tiberius Caesar. Tiberius was the son of Augustus, and Augustus was the emperor at the time Jesus was born. Augustus actually claimed to be a god, and there was a cult of worship that grew up around. And Augustus, it was said he was born of a virgin. Sound familiar to anybody? And so Augustus claimed divinity. Now, his son Tiberius was not as ambitious as his father. He didn't claim to be a god. So they made him the high priest of his father's cult. Tiberius was an interesting person. He never actually wanted to be emperor. It was forced upon him. And according to historians, he was known as a very sad and gloomy man. From all indications, he actually suffered from clinical depression. But Tiberius was actually not a bad guy for a Roman emperor. See, Rome operated on a form of government called an autocracy. Say autocracy. Autocracy is essentially one big cheese, tells everybody what to do all the time and has all the power. And so Tiberius inherited that in spite of not really wanting it. But he wasn't a bad guy as Roman emperors go. He was way nicer than Caligula, who would come later. Caligula was not a nice guy. He was a very mean, nasty guy. In fact, Caligula at one point promoted his horse to high office. He promoted his horse to consul. I don't know, maybe there's something there, a fresh perspective. Bringing horse sense back to politics. I know it's corny. I just had to say that. But Caligula was not a good guy. But Tiberius apparently was not a bad emperor, a decent fella. So Jesus' ministry took place during Tiberius' reign. And Jesus was handed a sensitive political issue we read about in Matthew chapter 22. Then the Pharisees went out and planned together to entrap him with his own words. How many know that's so often what politics consists of, especially today, isn't it? See what we can get over on you. See how we can trap something you say or something you do and make you look bad. That's sad when it's supposed to be an exchange of ideas about how can we better our country? How can we make life better for the people that we govern? That should be the question, instead of how in the world can I make them look stupid or incompetent or really, make them put him in disfavor. That's so often the case. And that's what happened here. They said, this Jesus is a threat. We got to see how we can take him down. And they sent to him their disciples along with a group called the Herodians. We'll tell you more about that in a moment. And they said, Teacher, we know you're truthful and you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. They sound nice, right? You don't court anyone's favor because you show no partiality. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Ooh, this was a sensitive issue in his day, especially amongst his own Jewish community. The thing about the Romans, they were very enthusiastic about taxing. They loved it. They loved to tax people, especially conquered people like the Jewish community that were not Roman citizens. They taxed the lower income people especially heavily, the working class, fishermen, carpenters, so forth. And they imposed upon them imperial taxes, local taxes, and for the Jews, they got even new tax called religious taxes. Ostensibly, it was supposed to support the temple, but the money actually was diverted to Rome to support the temple of Jupiter. That didn't go over well either. They were taxed out to the max. And the Romans were really astute at developing a knack for getting all they could out of people and still allowing them to survive to generate more tax revenue. In fact, it was stated that the Romans taxed the people at around 60% of their total production. 60%. Our tax system don't sound so bad now, does it? They were terrible about taxation. And particularly when it came to being taxed by your oppressors, when you had no citizenship rights and you had no recourse about what you could do. Now, these two groups that sent representatives to talk to Jesus and ask him this, they were called the Pharisees and the Herodians. And normally they hated each other, never got along, because the Pharisees represented the religious hierarchy amongst the Jewish community. They were the religious instructors. The Herodians represented King Herod, and they were connected. He was the puppet king that Rome had installed over the Jews. Normally they hated each other, but they both felt it was in their best interest to take Jesus down, because he was threatening the religious hierarchy, because he was teaching things that was getting people stirred up and making them question the religious structure. The Herodians thought he was going to mess up their arrangement with King Herod and all the goodies they got from being, connected to the king. So the Pharisees were about religious control. The Herodians were about political control. And the Pharisees, this was ingenious that they came up with this strategy when they asked Jesus, is it okay to pay taxes to Caesar? Because the Pharisees, if he said yes, they could holler, he supports the oppressors of our people. And if he said to the Herodians, no, if he said no, the Herodians could cry out, he opposes the rule of Caesar. They figured they had him either way. And this would take him down, surely, this upstart from Nazareth. And then you had a group called the Zealots. They were extremists dedicated to the overthrow of the Roman Empire. So Jesus was navigating this very volatile climate politically. And they asked him something that was a tremendous political hot potato for him. And here's what Jesus said to them. He realized their evil intentions. They sounded nice, but he knew what they were doing. He realized their evil intentions and said, you hypocrites, why do you test me? He said, show me the coin used for the tax. Would you bring that up, Brother and Dave? Here is the coin Jesus was referring to. So they brought him a denarius. Now, a denarius was a day's wage in that time. That was a very meaningful coin if you were the working class. Because if you had 5 of those, it got you from Monday through Friday. But they could be hard to come by. But that was a day's wage. And Jesus said, hand me that coin. I can see the guy that handed it to him, can't you? Jesus, I get that back, right? When you're through. And so they handed him the coin, the denarius. And Jesus said to them, whose image is this and whose inscription? And they replied, Caesar's. The coin in this instance bore on one side the phrase, Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus, on that one side where you see his headshot. On the other side, it reads in Latin, Pontifex Maximus, or the high priest of Augustus, the divine Augustus. Now, here's what struck me about this. Jesus did not advocate anything on that coin. As a Jew, he did not support the fact that Augustus should be worshipped, nor did he support his son being the high priest of his cult. He didn't like any of that, and yet he didn't rail against it either. That struck me. He said, whose image and inscription? They replied, Caesar's. Though he didn't advocate any of that, there was no railing, there was no harsh words concerning it. Caesar was in power. As we say today, it is what it is. And that's who was there. And so it got me to thinking about things I don't like that I see in civil discourse. What value is there for me to curse and insult those that govern us? I've been thinking about that. And I realize that it only hurts me. It doesn't hurt them. It does harm to me when I do that. When something comes on TV that really bugs me and I yell at it, and it doesn't help anything, does it? It hurts me and it annoys Carolyn. And so there's no value in that. When I annoy Carolyn, it makes things worse for me. Understandably. Now listen to this. Listen to what Jesus said. He said, look at this coin. Whose inscription is on it? Some things he didn't agree with. He said to them, then give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Now when they heard this, they were stunned, and they left him and went away. What do we do with that? So this didn't work out. Our plan didn't work well at all. But Jesus said there are obligations to Caesar or government, and there are obligations to God. And he said, make sure that you render both of them. Now let's look at our obligations to God, your understanding of God in unity. We got a lot of room for discussion about what God means. To some, it's a being or an entity. To some, it's the universe. To some, it's a principle or an energy. All that's cool with me. But let's condense it down to just the word God for sake of discussion. In Mark chapter 12, now one of the experts in the law came and heard them debating. And when he saw that Jesus answered them well, he asked him, which commandment is the most important of all? Jesus answered, the most important is, listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. To love God, to love our preciousness to the divine connection, the divinity we possess and the divinity all around us that we connect with. To love that, to cherish that. To cherish the Christ wherein we live, move, and have our being. And to love and care for other people as we go through this journey, just as we care for ourselves. These are the two greatest commandments. And these are our obligations, what we owe God. Both of these are simple and a glorious mystery that unfolds every day. Our continuing devotion to increasing the outshining of our divinity to our world. Those are our obligations to God, to love, to be people of love. What are our obligations to Caesar or government? Well, first of all, our way shower's example, don't fret about it, first of all. There was an autocrat in charge in his day who was, his father was supposed to be God. And Jesus didn't worry about any of that. He just kept the love flowing. A healthy focus on our internal journey is best in dealing with political discord or any discord around us. It matches with the beautiful serenity prayer. Let me give you the full version. We usually just get the partial version. God, give me grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish one from the other. That's good, isn't it? Remains good. So, does the news upset you sometime? Me too. You know what I started doing? I consume less news. Somebody, oh, you're hiding from it. No. I know it's still there, but I don't subject my consciousness to it as much. I can handle a little of it, and then I got to turn it off or turn to something else. Consume less of it. Jesus said in Matthew 6:27, and which of you by worrying can add even 1 hour to your life? Fretting over that is not helping anything, is it? Especially doesn't help us. What other obligations are due to Caesar? Well, we need to honor earthly authority, even if we don't agree with it, to honor and respect the position. Pay our taxes. Obey the laws. Pray for our leaders and do the most good we can in our community. Isn't that right? I know before I came here, I was a member of the Sheriff's Department chaplaincy, Shelby County Sheriff's Department, and I wanted to do something. I felt like that's something I can contribute to the community as a minister. But do you know, most of those people in that group, amongst the other chaplains, most of them are way different than me theologically and politically. But I thought, you know, if I can build a bridge to those guys, it's way better to me than building a barrier, because there's a lot of barriers, not near enough bridges. And it was a blessing for me. So to do the good that we can in our community. But there are times, and I will admit to this, when we have to challenge government and respectfully disobey. I remember one of me and Carolyn's first dates. We went on a march, protest march. It's a cheap date, very economical. And we weren't cussing or hollering or throwing things. We were making a stand, you know, for the increase of the minimum wage in Tennessee. And it was a blessing to be a part of. And it was handled in a way, we're standing for something that's good, we believe. And civil authority needs to hear this. Nothing wrong with that. It's a right that we cherish as Americans, isn't it? It's a right that's been continually challenged throughout our history. And in Rome, you couldn't do that. You put up a sign that said anything against Caesar, and you were in big trouble. You know, that wasn't going to be. But we have a form of government where that is enshrined in our way of life, that we can make a stand respectfully saying, you know, this needs to change. Some of the greatest examples we have in our history were Mahatma Gandhi and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., extraordinary examples of nonviolent, loving protest. It was said when Gandhi realized after years and years of occupying India, he sat with some officials and he said, we think it's time you left. Simple word. They said, you don't really think that's going to happen? He said, it will. It just takes some time. And it did. It took a lot of nonviolent protests, a lot of suffering, and a lot of receiving violent opposition. But eventually they left. Dr. King, another beautiful example of nonviolent protest. I watched some footage of him. It was so cool because he had a charming way about him that disarmed bigots and racists. And he was speaking to the sheriff of a particular community where he had come. And he said, the colored people of this community really appreciate how you do your job. And you could tell it. That wasn't what he was expecting. He was expecting this guy to give him, all kinds of trouble. But he had a loving way about him that said, this needs to change, but it's not directed personally at you. It's something that needs to change. Just a beautiful example that we should follow. Respectful. He was respectful even when he was standing in the presence of bigotry. And I believe with all of our heart we cannot spew words of contempt and insult and expect the divine flow of blessing. How about you? Bring up that picture, Dave. One of the most beautiful examples of nonviolent protest in American history. This took place at the Pentagon in 1967. The young man's name, as I recall, I wrote it down and forgot to bring it up here. Well, I believe his name was George Edgerly Harris III. He was a young 18-year-old actor. And look at him placing carnations in the barrels of guns pointed at him. Can you think of a more beautiful example of genuine, loving dissent than this? It really gets me every time I say it. How about you? Because this shows to me the genuine spirit of loving dissent. This needs to change, but I'm going to give you a carnation. Put it in your gun. Because I believe when we spew contempt at others, it's bad for our inner life and does not change anything. And how many know that anger that people feel, it comes from fear? It comes from fear. I'm afraid you're going to take away my way of life. Well, I'm afraid you're going to do that. And so the fear makes us angry. When we don't talk, when we don't discuss, when we don't try and understand each other. But I believe in good vibes. How about you? I believe in God, I believe in government, and I believe in good vibes all the way around. Isaiah 9:6 in closing. Isaiah said, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." No earthly concerns, including earthly government, should be allowed to interfere with the Christ being born in us and the Son being revealed in us. Being governed by divine love will always work, just like this. Isn't that right? Stand with me if you would. Let's make our affirmation in closing. I hope this helped you to have a sense of a better way to navigate the political climate we are experiencing this day. Repeat after me if you'd be so kind. I give Caesar what he is due. I devote myself to the divine within. My inner life remains tranquil and kind. The Christ is continually born and revealed in me. And that'll work. Bless you all. You can have your seats. Thank you so much.